In today's video, I want to review an Athletic article. We're talking about the top star players that are most likely to be traded within the next year. The results from the top agents around the league might surprise you. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today I want to review an article from Craig Custance of The Athletic, where he surveyed 21 of the top NHL agents from around the league who deal with a variety of players, many of which are star players. Of course, these agents answered the survey anonymously here, but there's a lot of talk about what star players are the most likely to be moved in next year, and I thought it'd be a fun discussion to kind of look at these survey results, see what we think here as a community, and of course want lots of feedback from you guys as well to say what you think as well. So here's what the results are. Now, the top three are the ones we're going to focus on here today. Number one was Patrik Laine. Number two was Jack Eichel. And number three was Toronto Maple Leaf star winger Mitch Marner. Now, for some, that might be a surprising list. Obviously, Laine and Eichel have had their fair share of trade rumors really for the last year, basically. And obviously Marner, a little bit, but not really. He's not a player you've seen too much in the rumor mill. A lot of talk about the Maple Leafs and how they're going to go about rebuilding their defense and all that, and the fact that one of their top four guys could be moved at some point. But for the most part, it was more about Nylander, more so in the rumor mill than Marner. So let's take a look at these one by one and see what the likelihood is. Now, let's start with Winnipeg Jets star winger Patrik Laine. 2015 second overall pick, has been a pretty solid 35 to 40 goal scorer. Often, somewhat criticized for his lack of defensive player, lack of 200-foot game, which I do think he's been working on, and certainly I think last year, it's fair to say, is getting better. Obviously, he's still a young player. There's still lots of room to grow and develop, and for a more complete player. But he's a pretty solid goal scorer. Not a lot of players in the NHL can kind of put the puck in the net the way that he can. Now, obviously, there's been talk about his future. Does he want to stay in Winnipeg? Do they want to trade him? Are they afraid of his next contract? Do they use him as trade bait to rebuild their blue line, which got decimated after the previous season's offseason? I mean, they saw them have a lot of guys leave, including Ben Sherratt, Jacob Trouba, Dustin Byfuglien didn't come back, Tyler Myers left in free agency, and their blue line is slowly getting there, but they still, don't have a lot in the form of star power on the back end, which would really be helpful in taking him, to the next step here. So obviously Laine has his future in doubt. Now he's got one more year left on his contract, at which he's going to be looking for probably a longer-term contract with a fairly substantial raise, and that kind of complicates things for the Winnipeg Jets here as well. Now, for the most part, I think it is believed and to be true that the Jets did have a lot of talk around a Laine trade this past offseason. They just never really came close to getting the offers that they really felt were fair enough to consider pulling the trigger. He's been linked to a variety of NHL teams around the league. There was a lot of talk about the Flyers being involved, Carolina, and several others as well that have had discussions in various capacities, some more serious than others, on Patrik Laine. So not a big surprise here that even the top agents around the league feel like there is a pretty good chance that he is traded sometime in the next season. So we're kind of looking at the rest of this offseason, during the season that's coming up here around the deadline, and of course into next offseason, which is obviously going to be a pivotal role in the case of Laine, especially where he's only got one more year after the coming year on his contract. It's going to happen sooner than later, if it is going to happen indeed, or he'll sign with long-term in Winnipeg and end up sticking around. Of course, if he gets what he wants in Winnipeg, which is top line minutes and top power play time all the time consistently, then, things could certainly change here a little bit. Of course, we also seen them acquire Paul Stastny this past offseason, which will hopefully solidify the top six here a little bit more, and hopefully will make things better overall as well. But certainly, as we've talked about various times here over the last number of months, Laine's future is uncertain, and certainly, like I said, they obviously believe that his time in Winnipeg could come to an end. So let me know what your thoughts are on we'll see Laine traded here sometime sooner than later, basically. Now, when it comes to Jack Eichel being number 2 on that list, I think a lot of that really depends on the success rate or lack thereof of the Buffalo Sabres during the upcoming NHL season. It's fair to say that after last year, Eichel made it pretty well known that he was extremely frustrated, tired of losing, and wanted some change. And I think the Buffalo Sabres are doing as much as they can, or at least to some degree. I think they had a decent offseason at trying to change the team enough to have some more winning ways. But they do have a ways to go, in my opinion. They made some decent moves this year. We'll see how the Taylor Hall experiment works out. That's going to be interesting. Can Jeff Skinner bounce back and be anywhere close to a 40-goal scorer again? Because he took a nosedive last year. Obviously, can some younger players like Casey Middlestat and Dylan Cousins take some steps forward? Will Rasmus Dahlin take a step forward on the back end to becoming that dominant blue liner that they were, drafting first overall a few years back? Will the goaltending be any better? Goaltending was a major issue for the Sabres last year. And obviously many people, myself included, believe that if the Sabres losing continues, it's only a matter of time before Jack Eichel does indeed ask for a trade. We've been assured by enough sources, including his agents before and recently here during the last offseason, that he has not asked for that. But will only one more year of losing get him to that point? It's certainly a questionable thing for sure. I mean, Jack Eichel could certainly get them a major haul. We had rumors earlier in the offseason that the Rangers were a team that were highly interested in trying to pry him out of Buffalo. We know that they just signed RFA center Ryan Strome to a new contract for a couple of years, but many believe he will not be there long term, that they don't really want to pay any bigger money than what they already have to see him, be that number 2 center long term. They do have some prospects in the system, or younger players that could eventually take that spot as well, like a Filipino, for example, and they certainly don't want to box them out of those opportunities. But if they could get a guy like Eichel, if that trade did come to be a possibility, I can see Strome being one of the main guys, along with a guy like Tony DeAngelo, for example, that I can see being moved out to make room and to make that happen. But obviously, Jack Eichel being high on this list from the agents isn't overly surprising, but at the same time, I think it's going to have to be a domino effect of more losing piling up before he requests that. I do not see the Sabres making any trades of Jack Eichel unless he specifically says, I want out, because he's their star player, he's paid big bucks, you don't get players like him every day, and they're just not going to do that if they aren't forced to. That's just my opinion on the Eichel situation. Now, the number 3 player in this list was probably the most surprising of the 3, and that's Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, of course, we know that the Maple Leafs situation, as they were developing and rebuilding this team, really from a cap perspective, strictly from a financial perspective here, was complicated greatly by the signing of John Tavares. When they signed him to that big-time 7-year contract, that certainly took away available dollars to round out the rest of the team. Obviously, they had guys like Matthews and Marner still on their entry-level deals, Nylander as well, and they were kind of working towards their next contracts, but they weren't quite there yet. Tavares got the big contract first, and it certainly made things quite complicated. It prevented them from having enough cap space as well, from really building up their blue line. And clearly, a lot of people, at least, I'm sure there's a lot of Leafs fans love John Tavares. They're glad the signing happened. I know we've seen lots of celebrations when the signing was announced. And I don't think there's too many Leafs fans, at least the ones I've talked to or seen on this channel, that are really all too upset or regret that decision being made. However, you have to admit now, especially because of the situation that we're in, which was not predictable a few years back, about the pandemic, the flat salary cap that we're going to have for the next few years. Clearly, that's going to have a major impact on things because they're not going to be getting those cap increases that they likely would have projected a couple of years back. They have some pretty, some pretty strong math people there, like Brendan Pridham, for example, and Kyle Dubas are really good at managing this, and they have their projections so many years out based on a lot of different factors that, they're really good at managing that. And I'm sure that there's a lot of things that have been thrown their way that they could not have predicted when that modeling was first all put together, when that decision was made to give Tavares the big bucks. But one of the agents here, and I'll show you a quote from the article quickly on the screen, even says that it was a big mistake signing John Tavares, that they should have never done that. They should have focused on Matthews and Marner, that having Tavares as, yes, it's a luxury to have Tavares and Matthews, the top 2 center icemen, but you just can't have 3 or 4 players making $10 million. You just can't round out your team well enough in today's salary cap world. So he felt that the Leafs making that move was a big mistake, and it's going to cost them, obviously, like I said, being the ability to have a more balanced team, I guess you could say. And obviously there could be some other agents out there that feel as well. It also comments here, as you can see, about the fact that Tavares is declining from a skating perspective, and they just don't feel like it was a good move. Now, like I said, I will be surprised if there's many Leafs fans watching this on this channel that comment that it was a bad move. I don't think there's been too many that I've seen talk to. There are people I know, that I talked to in off camera here that have really regretted it. But I guess let me know if you are feeling that way. If you're a Toronto fan, I'd like to see what your perspective is. But clearly, if they get to the point here that the team struggles, they're going to have to break up that core. I think this was an offseason where we've seen Kyle Dubas basically say, you got one more kick at the can here before we do something more substantial. They did not want to trade between Tavares, Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. They wanted to give that big four another opportunity with all that money tied up, another chance to have more success to see if they can take this a step closer to getting a Stanley Cup. But if they have another first-round exit, or even if they have a regular season blunder and don't have that success, I think it is fair to say that by the time we hit this time next year in the offseason, that there could be a much more blockbuster-type significant trade, and it's going to be one of those core members. And personally, if I had to pick, I always said along it would be Nylander or Marner before it would be Tavares or Matthews, partially because of the contracts as well. They did give Tavares a full no move, which complicates things as well. And obviously Matthews and Marner and Nylander are not quite at the stage yet where a lot of those clauses can kick in here. But, so they're more complicated. And obviously Matthews is making significantly more money. Nylander could be the best value of the contract of the bunch as well. But obviously many kind of value, Marner being that higher level, talent, being the playmaking winger that he is. I think he was largely responsible for the success of John Tavares in the goal-scoring category, especially in year one with Toronto. So obviously they feel that if the Leafs make a blockbuster move, that it's going to be Marner, and obviously they would likely, try to bring in a stud defenseman as well as some other pieces with that kind of trade. So it's interesting to hear the opinion of some of the top scouts and agents out there when you hear their perspectives. Let me know what your thoughts are. If we're going to see the blockbuster trades in the next year, are these the most likely candidates that you feel would be on the move? And let me know what your thoughts are on potential destinations or mock trades to see if these players could be pried out of their home cities. Let me know your thoughts on the article and these players down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.